Hi guys, Brian from Boas here. There are lots of places these days that you can go to sell your baby boas, but they're not all created equal. Today I'm going to go over some of the more common places you can use to sell baby boas, as well as the pros and cons of each. So if you're looking to sell some boas in the future, or even if you're just looking to buy boas and want to know about some of the different marketplaces, be sure to stay tuned. So a lot of us are so focused on breeding boas, we don't really think that much about the selling of the boas and how they're going to be placed in their new homes. But that, of course, is a very important aspect, something that you should definitely consider before you even try to breed boas. Today I'm going to touch base on the different means that you can use to sell the boas, but I'm going to also do a follow-up video about why your boas might not be selling if you're trying to sell boas but you're not really having much luck. And I've been getting a few questions lately from people that have had their first litter, or they have some boas on the ground and they just kind of gotten not great results with the approach that they're taking. So that'll be the follow-up video. I'll talk a little bit more about the marketing aspect. Today is just more going to be what are the different venues and what's the pros and cons of each. First, I just wanted to show you guys, I grabbed Mr. Pink. This guy is a 2019 Suriname from Florida Reptiles and Tudahoe bloodlines. And I always like holding this guy just because he's so mellow for a true red tail. He's also so beautiful. He's just got this beautiful coloration, lots of pinks and rose and red on his sides. Really chill, laid back. Just a great, awesome animal. Look forward to this guy breeding in maybe about 2-3 years time. Before getting to the specific options for selling boas, I just wanted to mention that marketing boas is really something that you should be thinking about all the time before you're even breeding them. It's important to let the reptile community know what you're doing, the animals you have, and the animals you might be producing in the future. And for this purpose, social media is really well adapted. I'm sure all you guys are on Facebook and Instagram, some YouTube as well, and the other social media sites. And this is a great way of sharing what you're doing with the whole reptile community. And I know a lot of negative things happen on social media. I know there's a lot of very pointless and often hostile discussion, but you don't need to partake in that. You can just put pictures of your boas on the different boa groups on Facebook, put up pictures on Instagram, etc. Let people know what you're doing. And it's a great way just to spread the word. And this is important to do before you even start breeding the boas, just to let people know what's going on. So if they want a specific type of boa and you happen to be working with it and have babies, 3-4 years down the road, they know where to go. Now for the first main category of where you can sell boas, and that's online reptile classifieds. And there's actually 3 main sites that have online reptile classifieds, which are Fauna Classifieds, kingsnake.com, and Morph Market. And they all have their pros and cons. I'm just briefly going to mention a few. Fauna Classifieds has been around a real long time. The site is a little bit dated. It's quite clunky. It's not the easiest to use, but it has the advantage that you can put ads up there for free. For a certain amount of ads. You can also go back and search very old ads going back all the way to the early 2000s when the site was established. So if you want to check out prices of what Suriname boas were selling for in 2005, you can do that. It also has the drawback of having a really clunky messaging system where people would contact you if they're interested in a particular animal you have. And for that reason, if you're going to use Fauna, I would recommend just putting your email in there or even your phone number. So that way, you don't have to deal with this really clunky messaging system on Fauna. And I've used Fauna in the past. Many of my potential customers have complained about the clunkiness of Fauna, and I sympathize with you on that. So I'm not using it all that much anymore. But it's something good if you don't want to have to pay money up front and you just want to list a few quick ads on a classified site. The next is kingsnake.com. So Kingsnake is not that much younger than Fauna. It's also kind of dated. It's a little more user-friendly though. It's a little more well-organized. They have a forum there that you can participate in. You can't search old ads, and the ads expire after a certain amount of time. You do have to pay money to place ads, and it's fairly reasonable. The more ads you want to place, obviously the more money, but you can get an account there, yearly account, for a fairly reasonable amount of money. Downside, a lot of people don't really look at this site anymore. The same thing with fauna classifieds. So it's probably not getting as much traffic as the third option, which is the newest, which is called morphmarket.com. And most of you guys know Morph Market, probably better than I do, to be honest. But Morph Market is the newest online classified. It's only a few years old. It's really slick. It's very user friendly. You can use it from your phone. It looks great to navigate even on your phone. It's just a much better user experience. Downside is that you have to pay money to use it. It's more expensive than the other sites. There's also more terms you have to agree to. And generally, it's more complicated to set up an account and to maintain an account. That being said, if your reptiles are selling much faster, could be a really good deal for you. I don't use Morph Market. I've never used it other than to browse, the beautiful animals up there. I don't have plans of using it in the future, but for a lot of people, it's a great option to sell reptiles online. One potential drawback with these online classifieds is you have to get the boa to its new home, which involves shipping. So a lot of people don't want to ship, and shipping isn't really all that hard, and I've done videos on it, so if you're reluctant, you might want to give it a try. But if you really don't want to ship, you can always sell animals locally. And you're not very likely to find local people if you put on these online classifieds, since they're basically the whole world. I mean, it's possible. But you might want to put an ad in either a local website, a local newspaper, something local to your area that has some type of classifieds. Generally, obviously, you're not going to get as large of an audience this way, and you're probably also not going to get as much money as you would, because there's just not as much of a market, especially if you live in an area that's pretty isolated. But then you don't have to deal with the shipping. You do have to deal with meeting up with the person, and that's a topic in itself. I would recommend, if you're selling things locally, unless you know the person, I would recommend highly to meet them in a public area. You don't want to invite them into your home if you don't know them. I mean, chances are they're, a very safe and friendly person, but who knows what could happen. So I would definitely recommend to just meet in a public area if you're going to do this. It shouldn't be very difficult to find a public area. I've done this before, meeting people at fast food restaurants or coffee shops, things like that. And usually people understand, and I've met a lot of people that have gone on to become really good friends this way. And once I know them, I'm comfortable having them over. But the first time, for security purposes, I just always meet somebody in a public location. So I would recommend not bringing the snakes out in the public location. You want to keep them discreet. But keep them in a bag or something. You can bring them inside, if it's cold out, obviously, but you don't want to take it out in public for a number of reasons. So that being said, there is another option that I've actually used in the past, and it's really frowned down upon, and that is Craigslist. And Craigslist is a local classifieds, and they've got all kinds of stuff on there, including animals. And if you go on Facebook, if you tell somebody you're selling on Craigslist, they look at you like there's something wrong with you, or you're really shady or whatever. But the first time I sold boas was on Craigslist back in the early 2000s, around 2005, when I had my first litter of Argentine boas. I wasn't aware even of the online classifieds, and I wasn't really connected to the whole reptile community. So I put ads on Craigslist, and I ended up selling them. It took, a few months, and had to have people come by my house and check out my snakes. And the price that they were sold for was about the market value at the time, maybe even a little bit less, which I'm not even going to tell you what it is, because it's, you'd probably be shocked based on what these animals are going for these days. But it worked for me. You can check it out. Of course, just observe the safety precautions I just told you about, but that's another option. And then you might want to check out a local pet or reptile store. Sometimes you can find one that will buy your animals for resale. And they might buy a few animals, and they might buy an entire litter, depending on the store. Of course, you're not going to get maximum dollar if you go this route. I would say the most you're going to get is about 50% of what the store ends up selling the reptile for. So that's just, part of having a store is it's very expensive upkeep. So that obviously they have to make their profit. So if you don't want to deal with the customers and you can just sell a bunch of snakes to a local store, that might be a way to go. But of course, you're not going to make the most money, and you're also introducing a middleman, which has a number of disadvantages. And while we're at that, I'll bring up the next possibility, and that is that you sell to a reptile distributor, somebody that buys entire clutches or litters of reptiles and then resells them. And typically these people, they want to buy lots of animals. They don't want to buy just one or two. They want to buy entire litters, you know, dozens, if not hundreds of animals, so they can turn around and resell them. And this is a easy and quick way. You just have to pack up a huge shipment, ship the animals, you get your money. A lot of negatives about this, obviously. The first is you're not going to get nearly the amount that you could get just by selling on your own. At most, you're going to get 50% of the market value of what the animals sell for. You might get even less than that. And then you have to bear in mind that most of these distributors, they just want to buy and sell stuff quickly. They're not really targeting like high-end collectors. So they're going to sell animals that don't have a lot of information. They might just say this is a Suriname boa with no information about the bloodline or anything like that. They don't really provide the husbandry information like its feeding records, things like that. So people are not going to pay as much for these animals. So you're going to get like 50% of whatever the distributor ends up selling them for. So it's, you know, significantly less than you could get by marketing and selling on your own. And then, you know, the buyers are going to lose a lot of the information. You know, like for example, this guy is a Tudahope / Florida Reptiles, born in 2019, bred by Brian Abramson. And if I sold his babies to a distributor, they wouldn't really include that information, which is valuable to many collectors. And many collectors are going to pay more money for the precise pedigree of their animals. So for that reason, this might not be the way to go. In addition, they don't typically go for like really high-end stuff. These distributors, they want stuff they can sell in bulk. So they're going to go more for pet store type snakes, you know, common boas with no lineage information or locality information, or just some of the more common morphs that you see, albinos and hypos and things like that. So something to consider. You know, a reptile distributor might not be the way that you want to go. Thought I'd grab another animal for you guys to look at, and this is a Hog Island boa. This is a 2018 female holdback Sears bloodline animal, and she's doing nicely, getting pretty close to adult size. Possibly be ready for breeding in the 2024 season next year, maybe the 2025 season, just depending on how things go. But just, you know, beautiful light colored animal, lots of pinks and oranges and other colors. So there's one more option for selling reptiles, which is pretty obvious, but this is an option that I don't use. I'm not completely against it, but there are a number of concerns I would have with using this kind of approach to selling reptiles, and that's a reptile show. So reptile shows, we've all been to them, and there's some advantages. You know, it's a really nice social event. You get to meet a lot of people. You get to show a lot of people your animals in person. If you have animals that are in demand at a reasonable price, you can often sell a lot. You could probably sell dozens of animals. You know, you might be able to unload, you know, a pretty good chunk of your inventory. So if you're looking to sell fast and you're looking to meet people, the reptile show might be the way to go. But there's a number of disadvantages, and these disadvantages for me are prohibitive as far as, you know, going to a reptile show to sell. And I actually did a whole video on this before, so check that out if you're interested. But I'm briefly going to recap. There's a lot of work involved in a reptile show. Depending on where it is, it might be anywhere from 10 or 20 miles away to thousands of miles away. So it's a huge logistical effort getting all of your animals to the show. You need specialized display cases and equipment just for the show, which costs money. And then you're going to need, you know, a large truck or van to, you know, truck everything around. And you're going to have to pay money for the table at the reptile show, probably around a few $100s depending on the show. So there's a pretty big investment of money. There's a large investment of time also, because if you end up having to travel to go to the show, it's going to take several days, and you're going to be pretty much fully involved in the show. You can't really do much else, so it's definitely a lot of resources. The other issue is that shows are good to sell certain types of reptiles. Typically, most people going to a show, they're looking to get more of a starter animal, so to speak. And I hate that use that term because it's kind of derogatory, but an animal that's less expensive and that less specialized, more of a pet store species. Things like a common boa or an albino boa or ball python, things like that. So you won't find much specialized reptiles at most shows, especially the smaller local shows. Some of the large national shows have a lot of stuff. So if you're breeding high-end locality boas, red tails, you're tracking the bloodlines and have pretty expensive animals, or if you're breeding high-end morphs, most people going to these shows, they don't have thousands of dollars to drop on an animal. It's just not realistic. So you're unlikely to sell animals that way. As a result of this, people that are searching for kind of a more high-end animal are not as likely to go to a show, because usually they don't have the higher end inventory there. So it's kind of a vicious cycle. And the last show I went to was, I think, back in 2016. It was a fairly local show out in Sacramento. Fairly decent size. It wasn't that small, but not a huge national show. But there really weren't a lot of boas. There was a few boas, but it was largely ball pythons and geckos, and then a few colubrids. So you're not going to get, say you want to get like an orange crush amorali or a Tarahumara boa or something like that that's more specialized. You're pretty unlikely to find it at one of the local shows, so people aren't going to be expecting it. So if you have animals like this, you're probably not as likely to find customers at the local shows. And a lot of people are just, they're new to reptiles, they have a casual interest. They're probably going to be in sticker shock when they see the prices that some of these animals are selling for, and they're thinking about, just picking up a, common boa or ball python for, $100 or something like that. The other issue with shows is the safety concerns for the animals, because you're bringing your animals into an unfamiliar environment where they're going to be exposed potentially to thousands of other reptiles. Mites are all over the place at these shows, and although shows are going to say you can't have your reptiles here if they have mites, they're not going to do any kind of thorough examination, and it's unpreventable. So you can expect that there will be mites at the shows. There's other diseases that have a potential concern as well. And then there's the issue of the customers. Even if 99% of them are great, there's always a few people there that are either going to try to steal animals or hurt your animals or just do something really horrible like that. So it's always a risk to the animals as well. Risk to the animals as far as the stress of carting them out to the show and having them there for a few days. So for me, it just completely doesn't make sense to do shows, since I have other avenues that I can use to find homes for my boas. And sometimes I'm nostalgic. It'd be cool to go to shows and meet people, and there's definitely a social aspect to it, but it's really not something that makes sense for me at this point in my reptile breeding journey. So how exactly do I market reptiles? Well, most of you guys watching know my strategy. I mean, my YouTube channel is obviously part of my strategy. It allows me to show you guys my animals, update you guys on my breedings and what I may have available, things like that. So that's been really valuable to me. It's taken a lot of work to make all these videos, but in the long run, it's great because it really publicizes what I'm doing as far as my breeding. The same thing applies to, I have a Facebook account, I have a YouTube or Instagram account, and I use those as well just to put up pictures just so people can see what I'm doing. Not nearly as active on those sites as with the YouTube, but they're definitely useful for getting the message out there. One possibility is a website. People will often set up a website for whatever their venture is that they want to get publicity for, and personally, I don't think a website makes sense for a lot of people these days. When there's social media, it's very easy to just go upload pictures. There's other options that you can do online to get the word out there. A website typically will take more time to set up and more time for maintenance, and there's costs associated with having a website, and it just seems really dated. I did have a website for my photography of all things back in the early 2000s, and I spent all this time setting up these galleries of all my beautiful landscape photographs, and I found that very few people actually went to the website. I was getting maybe a few dozen hits a day. Mostly people I just told about my photography, and I didn't spend nearly as much time trying to market my photography as I've done with the reptiles, but it just wasn't worth it, and ultimately I gave it up after a few years. And someone actually even approached me about a website, and they told me they would design a website for free for me and put it up, if I was interested, because they were, a website designer. And I really appreciated the offer, and I thanked them for that. But for me, it just doesn't make sense. So I told them that I'm just not going to do a website, because I just have so many other avenues online for reaching potential new owners of my boas. And one of these is Flickr, and Flickr is an online photo sharing site, and you can put photos up there of pretty much anything. So it's great for putting photos of my boas, because it's a nice and easy site to access. It looks really good. It's quick to upload the photos. You can put information about the animals there. It's free to use, up to like 1,000 photos, which is plenty for my purposes. So my Flickr site seems to be working quite well. And when people were complaining about the fauna classifieds and how clunky it was, I decided I'm going to put most of my animals that are available on the Flickr site. So far it's worked quite well. You just need to put an email where people can contact you, let people know about your Flickr site like I'm doing with this channel. You can use whatever social media to announce the Flickr site, because people aren't going to find it on their own. So it helps if you have some kind of reputation in the reptile community, if you can set up a Flickr site or a similar type of account, and it might be a good place for you to show off your animals that you have for sale. Finally, I wanted to say that once you become established as a breeder, and if you're working with a specific type of boa, word of mouth gets really important, because there's only a certain number of people worldwide working with certain locality boas. You might be talking about 1 or 2 litters born every year in the entire world. So it's a very, very exclusive amount of animals available. If you can produce these animals and people know you're out there, pretty soon people will be coming to you asking about availability. And of course, this doesn't happen overnight. It takes a while to build up a reputation. But never ever underestimate how important your reputation is, how important your integrity is. It's always really important to stand by your word. Don't lead people on, don't lie to people, be upfront and direct with people, and just do everything you can to accommodate customers and make them happy. Because if you have one negative experience where a customer is not satisfied and spreads the word about you, that's probably going to do as much damage to your reputation as 100 positive experiences and satisfied customers. So I always focus on the customers. And this doesn't just apply to the current customers. You want to focus on your potential future customers. So if someone comes to you asking questions about reptiles, or just a general question about boas, you want to do your best to answer them and to provide that information. It's just good for the reptile community as a whole, and it's definitely going to come back to help you and help your reputation in the long run. Conversely, I've seen people that have developed a negative reputation for whatever reason, and their options in continuing in the reptile community are really limited. Some people's reputations have just been completely trashed, mostly deservedly so, but that's an unfortunate aspect of the hobby. There's some not so good people out there. Vast majority of people are great to deal with, but there are a few that just you don't want to deal with. So you don't want to be in that second category, and you definitely want to focus on customer satisfaction and developing your reputation and preserving your integrity. Anyway, I hope this video was helpful. Stay tuned. I'm going to do a follow-up video in the next week or two about why your boas might not be selling if you've been trying to sell them, so stay tuned for that. Shoot me any questions or comments you have. Thanks for watching, and enjoy your boas.